A Thousand Horizons, an independent historical chronicle of New York City. New York City stands today as one of the most influential urban centers in human history, a global crossroads where ideas, cultures, ambitions, and contradictions collide in a never-ending dance of reinvention. But long before the gleaming skyline pierced the Atlantic mist, the land that would become New York bore witness to thousands of years of human presence, migration, conflict, and transformation. The city's story is not merely one of architecture and commerce. It is a vast tapestry woven with threads of indigenous heritage, colonial power struggles, revolutionary sparks, waves of immigration, industrial metamorphosis, and cultural evolution. To understand New York City is to understand a living organism, restless, resilient, and forever reaching toward new horizons. The earliest chapters of New York's history begin with the Lenape people, an Algonquian-speaking nation who inhabited the region long before European arrival. Their homeland, Lenapehoking, stretched across modern-day New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Manhattan, later the iconic heart of New York City, was known as Mananhata, or Island of Many Hills. The Lenape lived in seasonal cycles, moving between fishing grounds, hunting territories, and agricultural fields, where they cultivated maize, beans, and squash. Their relationship with the land was one of stewardship rather than domination. Rivers like the Hudson and East were not barriers separating peoples. They were highways of connection, arteries of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. This harmonious existence was disrupted in the early 17th century when Dutch traders, drawn by the lucrative fur trade, arrived along the Hudson River. In 1609, Henry Hudson sailed under the Dutch flag in search of a northwest passage, only to find a lush estuary teeming with wildlife and potential profit. Within a decade, the Dutch West India Company established trading posts, and by 1624, settlers arrived to found New Netherland. Manhattan became the colony's southern anchor, with New Amsterdam established at its tip. Although popular myth reduces the island's purchase to a comical exchange of trinkets, the reality was far more complex. Cultural misunderstandings about land ownership, compounded by European expansionism, would soon lead to tensions, conflicts, and irreversible change for the Lenape. Dutch New Amsterdam grew into a bustling, if chaotic, port town. It was multicultural from the start. Swedes, Africans, some enslaved, some half-free, Walloons, Germans, Portuguese Jews, and sailors from every corner of the seas walked its muddy streets. The Dutch prioritized commerce over conformity, allowing religious diversity rarely tolerated elsewhere in Europe. The colony's tolerance made it a magnet for dissenters and dreamers. In 1664, the English seized control of New Netherland with barely a fight, renaming it New York in honor of the Duke of York. Under British rule, the settlement expanded rapidly. Streets evolved from Dutch irregularity into a more structured layout. Estates, farms, and outlying villages connected into a growing metropolis. The city became an essential node in the Atlantic economy, importing manufactured goods, exporting raw materials, and, tragically, becoming a significant hub in the transatlantic slave trade. By the mid-17th century, enslaved Africans made up a considerable portion of New York's population, shaping its workforce, culture, and infrastructure. The African burial ground, rediscovered centuries later, stands as lasting testimony to their presence and suffering. As revolutionary fervor swept through the colonies, New York found itself at the heart of political and military upheaval. It hosted fiery debates, protests, and the activities of groups such as the Sons of Liberty. However, after the Declaration of Independence, New York became the stage for some of the Revolutionary War's most consequential battles. In 1776, George Washington's Continental Army suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Long Island, retreating through Manhattan in a desperate withdrawal. The British occupied the city for the remainder of the war, transforming it into a Loyalist stronghold. Fires, espionage, and clandestine operations became part of everyday life. When the war finally ended, Washington returned to Manhattan to bid farewell to his officers, delivering one of the most emotional speeches in American history. The post-revolution years saw New York emerge as the fledgling nation's temporary capital. It was here that the first Congress convened, the Bill of Rights was shaped, and Washington was inaugurated as the first president on the balcony of Federal Hall. Though the capital later moved to Philadelphia and then to a newly built Washington, D.C., New York retained its momentum and ambition. Immigration began reshaping the city on an unprecedented scale, accelerated by industrialization and vast economic opportunities. The 19th century transformed New York from a commercial center into a global metropolis. The construction of the Erie Canal in 1825 was pivotal, linking the Atlantic coast to the American interior.